up, it says, God at work with Jim Whedbee. God's been at work with Jim Whedbee and hasn't done any good for several years. But yeah, there is God at work with Jim Whedbee. Thank you, God. Please continue. Thank you, Mayhan, for that reminder. Anyway, this is our inaugural evening for several weeks of getting to know people in our community who keep our world running day after day. And before we get into that, Jennifer Smitty, who is a teacher, keeps our world running day after day, wants to say a few words about Operation Inasmuch. Jennifer, you want my mic?
Oh, no. Can you hear me? I've been yelling kids all day. Okay. So, well, first of all, I thought I was speaking at dinner, so this is not the audience I was planning on, but it's lovely to see everybody.
Can you help me up, Mark?
Here you can lean on me. And I'm here.
You got paid when you did that.
All right. Anyway, I'm here on behalf of the Mission Committee to ask people to sign up for Operation Inasmuch. But when I look at this group of folks, I know that you serve the Lord throughout the day, every day, when no one's looking. And but I'm still going to share my message with you. It's very brief. Every time I step out of my comfort zone and serve in some capacity, I would even say today, I ran down here. I wasn't planning on staying. I've been at work all day, still got stuff to do. But I'm on the mission committee, and I'm doing my job because that's what I'm serving Jesus. I'm working for Jesus. So every time I do that, I am blessed. I have spoken to people in the hallway I haven't seen in a long time. It's just great to see everybody's faces. Every single time I work for Jesus, I am blessed. And hopefully I'm a blessing to someone else, because that's the goal. So Operation Inasmuch is an opportunity to be blessed and serve the Lord. It is August 28th. I have signed up to help at the park and clean up around the lake. There are many opportunities. There are things I'm not qualified to do, like sew and knit. But I can sweep and clean and do those outdoor chores just fine. So if you cannot serve physically that day, there are other ways you can serve. And this also is double duty in that it meets the expectations of the United Methodist Church, which is to give our prayers, you can pray, your presence, if you can, your gifts, which are your talents as well as a financial gift, if that's how you want to give. Your, I wrote it down just in case I forgot. Your service, which is physically serving, and then you may have the opportunity to witness, or someone may witness to you. So the logo or the theme is get out of your seats and into the streets. And you can do that with your church or with other churches or with your friend or make a new friend on August 28th. Sign up online. If you can't do that, contact the church office and we will help you get registered. Any questions? All right. Thank you for your moment.
Well, we're going to be very informal here, and John and I are going to remain seated unless he chooses to stand up and speak. But let me say one more word about you, Jennifer. You all may remember, many of you, that Jennifer was on the staff a few of the years when I was here as pastor. And when she decided to resign and go back to school and become a teacher, do you remember what I said that Sunday in worship when we had you to come to the front of the church? When I tell you, you'll remember. You know, with pastors, our mouth gets ahead of our brain pretty often, as mine did just about every Sunday. And so I was just thanking her for the work she did. She did great work. And I said, so she's talking about not being able to sew or cook or something like that, didn't you say? I said, Jennifer is leaving this position to become a homemaker. Do you remember that? She laughed at that. But anyway, thank you, Jennifer, for your announcement. Tonight, let me say first a word about next week. Vanessa Hensley is going to be with us. She is a social worker at the Volunteer Ministry Center, working with people who are experiencing homelessness. That is her situation to help people find housing and does a great job with that. She's an unusual person, very talented, very gifted. So not that it's unusual to be talented and gifted, but the way she gives her heart to this job is unusual. So I hope you'll be here next Wednesday night to get acquainted with Vanessa and hear what she has to say. So tonight, our first guest is John Eldridge. How many of you were here when his dad was pastor? Oh, several of you, okay. He may talk a little bit about that. John is an attorney, he said this far from retirement, I'll let him tell you that, and is the chancellor for the Holston Conference of the United Methodist Church. So he comes tonight with two hats, and I have sent a list of questions. I'm not going to stick with these because I want our guests to be feel free to talk about whatever, but one of the questions, after he introduces himself and tells you a little bit about what he does, that I want to ask him is to ask him how his faith influences his work day after day. John, welcome back to Fountain City United Methodist.
Thank you. Great to be here. Thank you. Just coming in the doors reminds me of being here so long ago, and I was trying to remember when my father was here as a pastor, so we walked all the way down the hall to the Rogues Gallery and found out that he was here from 1976 to 1981. That was his years. I appreciate Jim inviting me, and I like this idea. How does faith impact your vocation? It's a great question. I practiced law for 42 years. And I am, as he says, I'm that close to retirement. You can't just quit when you're in private practice. You have to slowly work out your cases, and then one day there won't be any more. There won't be any more, but there won't be any more money either. That's the other factor.
Yeah, they hadn't paid me a penny since.
About 2 weeks ago, I was scheduled to try what I think is going to be my last trial. And I wanted to win that one because I wanted to go out with a big win. Well, I lost it squarely. I mean, completely. And then I thought, I don't like that. And then I began to think, well, if I thought back to when I tried my first case, I probably lost that one too. And then you thought you learn a lot more from the cases you lose than the cases you win. And I think that's why I got to be a pretty good lawyer, because I lost a lot of cases. A few words about my father. When I came back to law school in 1976, and I lived at the parsonage, studied all the time. And anyway, my second year, I got a clerkship, and a clerkship is kind of, you do whatever rolls down the hill in a law office. If that means run an errand or go get some lunch or whatever, you just do it. And I got a job as a clerk with Robert W. Ritchie. Now, anybody ever heard of Robert W. Ritchie? Some people have. Quite a well-known criminal defense lawyer, really a fine lawyer. And he became my mentor. And little by little. Anyway, all that was fine and good until after I finished law school, he said, John, why don't you come work for me? Be a criminal defense lawyer for me. And I thought, sure, I'd love to do that. I'd just love to do that. Then I told my father, and he was not particularly pleased about me hanging around with those people. I guess he thought it's bad enough that my son is a lawyer, but my gosh, he's a criminal lawyer too.
Look who he was hanging out with. How did he say anything?
So I tried to reason with him. I said, Dad, if if a convicted murderer comes in your church, are you going to kick him out? Or are you going to let him in? Oh, I'd let him in. And if he wants you to pray with him, will you pray with him? Well, of course. And if he wants to have communion, will you serve communion to him? Well, yes. And I said, are those practices of a minister any different from my practicing my profession, lawyering, by being hired to go represent somebody in court who's charged with a criminal offense? What's the difference? What's the difference, I said. He said, there's a difference. And it reminded me of that old adage. I think I first heard it with using a woman. A woman convinced against her will remains unconvinced still. Have you heard that? Anyway, little by little, as the years went by, he came around, and after a while was quite proud of his 2 sons in criminal law. Brother David, who was your janitor here in the late 70s, also followed in criminal law and also worked for Robert W. Ritchie. Anyway, I used to kid Dad. I said, now, Dad, you got 1 clergy son. You got 3 sons, 1 clergy son, and 2 lawyer sons, 2 criminal defense lawyer sons. At least 2 of us made good. So what kinds of criminal law did I do? I did everything from representing somebody in city court on a citation to a death penalty case. I only ever tried 1 death penalty case, and I lost it. And I tried it about 10 years after I got out of law school, and it haunted me. Because obviously they took the man immediately to death row, and he's there a long time. And I kept worrying, I'm going to get a call sometime. They're going to say, we're going to kill him. We want you there. And lo and behold, he died of natural causes. Saved me completely. He stayed in touch with me because he was he was the only death row inmate who got a college education. Obviously, he did it online, but he always wanted a little money for that. People often ask, how can you represent citizens accused of crime? And I think what that means is, how can you be associated with someone who has done such a terrible thing? Or don't you have to violate your own sense of morality to do what you do? And the answer is easy. I don't violate my own sense of morality. I enjoy what I do. My role is to get the best possible result for that client. I mean, that's what lawyers do. We try to get the best possible result. And it starts with a lack of judgment, not being judgmental. It means accepting whoever comes in that door, wherever they are, whatever they've done, accept them as they are. In fact, when I don't put my own sense of right and wrong on them and put my judgment on them. In fact, when somebody comes in the door and they're accused of something, I'll give them the charging document, the warrant, and I won't say, did you do it? I'll always just say, what do you know about this? What do you know about this? And that way I can tell pretty quickly how this case is going to go. The whole criminal justice system would not work at all if we didn't have criminal defense lawyers. We just wouldn't. Because, I'm not the state. The state's trying to put you in prison. I'm trying to keep you out. And the idea is the two forces push against one another, and the result is justice. At least that's the theory. But there's a faith-based part of this as well. And that is that every defendant I have ever represented was a child of God. Was a child of God and deserved to be treated as such, with respect. And remember, no matter how despicable a person is or whatever they've done, once upon a time, he probably had a mama who loved him and adored him. You can count on that. So I would approach my representation of a defendant remembering daily, this crazy guy is a child of God, and I'm going to respect him. And I learned that kindness, that cardinal Christian virtue of kindness is the way to go. There's an expression that I like. It says, be kind to everyone you meet, for everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about. I find a lot of truth in that. And one thing I've tried to incorporate in my life in the last, hopefully 20 years, hope I've done it 20 years. I wouldn't take the time to do this, and I'm sure some of you do the same thing. When you encounter somebody, you try to make that experience, that encounter, give them a little lift in their life, as a result of your having had that encounter. You do it with I do it with lawyers, I do it with secretaries, I do it with clerks in the post office, and cashiers, just whatever. And sometimes I don't try. Most of the time I try. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it doesn't work. And I bet some of you do the same thing. For the past 10 years, I've been the conference chancellor. And it had its origins right here in that room where we ate. I came out to Jay Garrison's funeral. Jay Garrison was the conference attorney. And there I saw Mary Frances Tucker, and you know Mary Frances. And she said, John, why don't you make yourself available for that? And I did, and Bishop Swanson said, come on. So I've done that for about 10 years. What that means is that I advise pastors and DSs and sometimes even the bishop, imagine that, on thorny legal matters. And I try to have a little fun with it. And for example, if a pastor calls and he says, I've got this thorny legal issue at church and I don't know what to do about it and it's causing trouble and and sometimes we can come up with something to do about it and sometimes we don't come up with anything. But just to know that there's nothing can be done is sometimes as important as knowing what to do. So I always end those conversations with, now remember, Pastor, remember, this is the Lord's work too.
How much do you get paid for that work as the conference chancellor?
It's a volunteer position. It's a volunteer position.
Can you imagine?
It's fun. It has been fun. Part of my faith has been informed by my opposition to the death penalty. In the mid-90s, I had this bumper sticker that said, the death penalty, WWJD. Remember WWJD? What would Jesus do? Well, I think I know what Jesus would do with the death penalty. He'd say, get rid of it. So anyway, I decided I would become certified in death penalty work. You have to have a number of murder trials behind you, and you have to have some special training. And I started taking cases. And the first thing I would do is put together a legal team. The first thing I do is find another lawyer. You know, you get 2 lawyers when you're charged with a death penalty. And then we'd hire a private investigator. And then we'd hire a psychologist. And then to figure out if the person has a psychological deficit of some kind. And if there's something there, then we may get a psychiatrist. So you begin to see it can get expensive. It costs a lot of money to try to kill somebody. And it would cost a lot less. It would cost a lot less than if we just put them up, just put them away, hold them for 70 years. So be it. Taxpayers would spend a lot less money. So when I would get these, and I did about 8 or 10 of these, 8 or 10 death penalty cases after that one I tried. And the whole purpose of what I was trying to do was to get the thing settled. Get the thing settled. Because that way you can avoid the death penalty. And sometimes all I accomplished was pleading someone guilty to life without parole. That means they're going to die in prison. My most famous one was Jennifer Hyatt. You may, when I tell you what she did, you'll remember. She tried to break her boyfriend out of jail. He had been at Morgan County, and the two prison guards brought him down to Roane County for court, and I don't know what he was doing there, but something. And as he was being put back in the prison van, she got out of her car with a gun and shot him. She says she didn't mean to. Well, anyway, she shot him. And then there was a big chase up Highway 75. A very poignant story about her, though, is that when we finally resolved the case, she wanted to apologize to the victim's, the wife of the fellow she killed. So after the plea, she sat on one end of the jury table, and the wife sat on the other end of the jury table, and she just cried. She just bawled her head out. Just bawled her head out. Strange. After a while, I felt like it was kind of a calling to do this death penalty work. I had a calling, I thought. I knew what I was doing. I was fairly good at it. There weren't a lot of people who would do it, so I did it. And anything to keep the state from killing another one of God's children. Another thing I've done because of my faith is pro bono work. Pro bono work, taking civil cases, criminal cases sometimes, take cases from the Legal Aid Society. They have too many. They're always looking to farm some out. What I didn't like to do was pro bono work that I did not go into as a pro bono case, meaning I got stiffed. I never liked that. Another thing that I did in my practice, and it was a fluke, I got into it, I got appointed to represent a fellow who was unhappy with the Knox County Jail back in the late, I guess that was the 80s. Yeah, I guess that was the 80s. And he had sued, and they were looking for a lawyer to represent him and see if he can make it a class action and see what we can do about Knox County Jail. Well, at the time, the jail was not very nice. It needed we needed a new jail, and we got one. We got one. And through the years, lawsuits have filed lawsuits against other sheriffs and other counties to get them to do something about their jails. You know, every time the idea would come up about we need to do something about our jail, the county commission would always find some other good use for that money. And another year would go by and there would be nothing done. Well, if you put that off for 20 years, 30 years, it gets pretty bad. I mean nasty jails. People stacked like cordwood. They sleep on the floor, and it's just terrible. So anyway, we got new jails in Claiborne County, Campbell County, Union County, Blount County, Hawkins County, and Sevier County. I probably left out some of that. Oh, I got tickled. The sheriff is not always an adversary in these cases, because they think, hey, I'm going to get a new jail out of this. And one time I was walking in the courthouse, and the sheriff hunted me down, and he grabbed my hand and shook it. He said, "Thank you for your lawsuit. Thank you for your lawsuit." I'm going to wrap up this little talk by trying to answer a couple of questions. One of his questions was, has your faith ever gotten in the way of your work? Has your faith challenged any decisions or actions you have made? And in thinking about this question, I've been reading Bill Haslam's book, his new book out. It's called Faithful Presence, in which he addresses the issue of, can you be a Christian in politics? Fascinating book. But let me take a different path. Growing up in a parsonage, as I did, and hanging around with people in churches, as I did, all my life till I got to law school and became a lawyer, I didn't know what an estate was, and I didn't know what a trust was. I knew what a covenant was. I didn't know what a contract was. And the hardest thing for me about becoming an attorney was growing into the realization that, unlike the church, where you learn to expect kindness and humility and forgiveness and people who love you no matter what, at least that's the way we hold ourselves out, and we do for the most part, I think. The rest of society, including law, don't operate that way. They do not operate on those principles of love and forgiveness and humility, etc. I had to learn that human nature is to want more than you have and to take more than you can get, or get all you can take. And that was hard for this old preacher's kid. It just was. Give me some for examples. In charging fees, if I raised my hourly rate or I increased my retainer for a particular case, was I doing it for greed, or was I doing it because 10 years later I'm a better lawyer and worth more? Did I thank my staff sufficiently for what they do to achieve what measure of success we have? Was I being too proud when I would gloat over a case that I won, that I was particularly happy about? Or am I humble enough to let another person shine? Sometimes those questions can be difficult to answer. I will tell you one compliment. I meant to tell you this earlier. I got one compliment came recently from a mother of a clerk that worked for me 15, 20 years ago. I don't know why she never told me this, but she told me, she said, my daughter Amy, when she worked for you, you would take her to court and she would report to me. She'd say, Mom, John's always prepared and he knows what he's doing. And when he talks, he sounds like a preacher.
I wonder why.
I wonder why. And finally, Jim's question, what have you done or what do you do that you think probably makes God smile or weep? And I'll answer that by simply saying, if you want to make God laugh, tell him what your plans are. That's all I've got prepared. If you have questions or if there's time for that,
Sure.
I'll be happy to,
Yes, please.
to go.
Please ask questions.
I've always wondered how a defense attorney would handle it. You're defending somebody, and he says, I didn't do it. I'm totally innocent of this. But as you investigate, you discover, yeah, he did do it.
Yep.
So how do you handle that, John?
The way you handle that is you sit him down and you say, I know what your position is, but let me tell you about witness X. Witness X is going to say X is going to say this, blah, blah, blah. And how are you going to deal with that? And witness Y is going to say blah, blah, blah. How are you going to deal with that? And after a while, they begin to see that I can't, we got to work something out. Normally. Although I have had cases, have had clients who just simply refuse to do anything but go to trial when I know it's not in their best interest. I know it's not in their best interest. Yes, sir.
Why is there so much? Why does somebody have to stay on death row so long, knowing that they're going to be executed? And it seemed like some folks there about a month. That comedian talks about Texas. We have 2 lines, no waiting, for execution. But I just wondered, it looks like that would be so hard to live knowing that you're going to die one day.
I think it would be. So many states have outlawed it. I think it's 16 states have outlawed the death penalty. I started to say this. It's a long process to get through the appeals. I will tell you that. If once you try the case and you lose, you head to the Court of Criminal Appeals, then you head to the Tennessee Supreme Court, and then you head to the United States Supreme Court. And if you lose that, then you go back to the trial court where you were, and you file what's called a post-conviction. And if you lose that, you go up to the Court of Criminal Appeals, and then to the Tennessee Supreme Court, and then to the United States Supreme Court. And then if you lose there, you go into federal court, and you file a post-conviction. And if you lose there, you go to the Sixth Circuit in Cincinnati, and then to the Supreme Court. So, part of the reason it just takes a long time to do that. And think of the resources. Goodness gracious. My experience has been that when a judge puts his stamp or her stamp that, yes, this is a good conviction under the law, they have thoroughly worked that case. They have spent a lot of time on it. You can count on it. So it's expensive, it's time consuming, but I don't know how to answer your question. It's a tough one. Yes, sir.
I'd say the sheer volume of cases too is what slows that process down.
And the sheer volume of
the
cases.
volume of how many cases, yeah.
Absolutely.
Why do you think so many people, and so many people's not a good phrase, but some people are so eager to see someone die? Is it retribution?
Yes.
Get them off the streets? There's another way to do that.
Yes, there is.
So why do you think, with your faith, why do you think people are so eager to see someone die?
Because they can't forgive. They just can't forgive. I mean, forgiveness is to me, forgiveness is, if not one of the most hallowed parts of Christianity. Forgiveness. And I'm confident that people who, they want that recent case, not so recent anymore, the case my brother tried. Something murders, the carjacking, what I'm talking about. The father, the father just could not forgive, could not let, he was so angry. He was so angry.
He did come around to that.
I
though,
think
didn't
he finally came around. I don't know how.
Yeah.
I don't know.
You know, one of the things in the coming weeks that we'll be doing is, as we meet various people, and this is what I want to see happen, is that we hear people give their views on things that we might not agree with. So I hope whether we come to agree with that or not, it will cause us to think about whatever the issue may be, and will cause us in some way to grow in our faith and in our love and in how we live our lives each day. Okay, other questions for John? Feel free to ask them.
So is the death penalty worth all of these appeal options? You just said when the judge puts their stamp on it, they've done their research, they're obviously very familiar with it. Is it worth going through all this other stuff, or would it be, I hate to say simpler, but would it be more fair for the person on trial, the defendant, to just stop there, rather than maybe keep your hope going years later?
I've often said that if I was going to get charged with a crime, this is the country I'd want it to happen in. And the reason is that you can't stop me from appealing. You can't stop me.
Good.
I think that's the short answer, and I'm going to keep appealing as long as I can appeal. You know, the latest thing right now is that the death penalty is unconstitutional because it causes too much pain, which seems crazy, but, you know, a lawyer will latch on to anything that'll work. Believe me. Believe me.
John, you said something about not being judgmental. I talked with someone today who's going to be with us later. He's an African American. And I talked to him about what's it like to drive black, for example. He gave instances of where he has been stopped, for example, for a cracked windshield. I drove around for months with a cracked windshield and never was stopped.
Yep.
But I said, what keeps you from being angry? I don't mean to get ahead of this interview. I said, but what keeps you from being angry in a situation like that? He said, I try not to be judgmental. So maybe that's something we're going to be looking at during these coming weeks. I know I've never been an interviewer. I'm not an interviewer. I've never done an interview before in my life, as you can probably tell. So, but I think a good interviewer does not enter oneself into the interview, but that's what I'm doing a little bit. Chelsea and Chase were talking a while ago about a TV show, comedy. Is it a comedy, Chelsea? Yeah, called Between the Ferns. Yeah. Have any of you seen that? None of you has seen it? Don's up to date on TV programs, Chase says. Don, have you seen it?
Not at all.
So this may turn out to be a comedy. So we may come in next week and we have ferns on each side of the stage. But it's going to be a fun time, and I hope you'll invite other people to join us. What John has done tonight is exactly what I hope to happen each week.
Good.
I really do, John. We appreciate it. But please ask other questions, or he might be able to stay around for a few minutes afterwards if you, okay?
I've always heard lawyer jokes. You know, how do you, as a caring Christian man, deal with the negative stigma of being a lawyer? How does
What negative stigma?
Well, I won't share with you the ugly things I've heard, but
You don't do personal injury, do you?
Not
It's
much.
like a used car salesman.
Not much, not much. I think lawyer jokes are funny. I just think they're funny.
Well, let me tell you one.
What? What do you got if you got a lawyer up to his neck in sand? Not quite enough sand. Anyway, I think the answer to that question is that we attorneys practice our trade in such a way that when you know, you may not need us, you may not want us, but when you need us and want us, I'm your friend.
That's right. That's right.
I'm your friend.
That's right. That's right.
Does that answer it?
So you want to be the best that you can be. I mean, the level of education is, impressive, and, the success. But I just, it makes me sad that, I don't know, that everybody should just be nice, but, but then we wouldn't need you.
John, Becky's had to live with Undertaker jokes all the time. I don't want to talk so much because he'll fuss at me.
Yeah.
But look what, I think East Tennessee's so much safer. Look what's happening in some of our towns. They let people out and they go kill somebody else, a child or something like that. The papers and the TV are full of it, John.
I know.
I mean, and I think East Tennessee, thank God, is much safer than any place I could believe we could live.
Well, judges sometimes make mistakes. I mean, they're fallible. They're human just like we are. And they'll let somebody lose. This man had a question.
And I know that you are trained as a lawyer not to be judgmental or try to put your judgment back. But us as lay people that doesn't have that kind of training, what would be some comments you could make to us to keep us from being too judgmental about situations?
You mean in the law?
No, just in anything we see. I see somebody out here maybe that has a hairdo that I don't like, and I try to judge that person because of that, or whatever. What kind of things can we do to help ourselves not to be so judgmental about situations?
I think being non-judgmental of others begins with being non-judgmental of me. Accept me as I am. And if I can accept me as I am, I can accept you as you are. If that makes any sense.
He's the one we're interviewing, but I want to make another statement. I met someone the other day of whom I had formed an opinion over a period of 4 or 5 years. And I said, this guy doesn't like me. And I had 2 or 3, I'd never met him, but I had 2 or 3 reasons why he didn't like me. I won't go into them, why I thought he didn't like me. Well, I finally met him one day, or finally introduced myself to him. I said, hey, I'm Jim, blah, blah, blah. He said, yeah, I know you. I said, so that's why you don't know. And man, the more we talked, the more I realized I couldn't have been more wrong. I was judgmental against him for being judgmental against me, which didn't work. It didn't work at all. And now we're friends. So, I mean, I think one of the best ways to keep from being so judgmental, if you'll allow me to take your role here, is to get to know these people. I mean, since I've retired, I've had more time to do this, to get to know people outside of the church and in a different way. And I've realized, man, you've got a lot of growing to do. So I almost feel like I have to apologize to this congregation for not doing that more while I was here. Excuse me, I wanted to say it now.
You're fine.
Anything else for John?
You're fine.
What was that, walking somebody else's shoes for a while?
Yeah. Right. Okay.
Well, you've been a very good audience. Thank you.
You've been a very good...
Thank you.
So I hope you'll hang around. Dawn, do you want to say
Quick question. John, you've told some funny ones before, but maybe if I missed this, because I missed the first part. What's one of the funniest things you've had happen to you as a lawyer? Because you told me some, I don't remember off the top of my head, but they were just hilarious. And that may be too much to try to get you to pull up real quick. And while he's thinking, on your way out today, we have some of these blessing bags that are here on your left at the table where you signed in or paid or whatever like that. You're welcome to take one of those blessing bags. They're for you to use if you encounter someone who's in need in our community or whatever. You're welcome. Someone says, hey, can you give me money or food or whatever? You can give that bag and know that that covers a whole bunch of different needs. Or you're welcome to deconstruct the bag and give parts of it out. But they're out here. Our youth and other volunteers have made those, so please use those to be a witness in our community. John, I put you on the spot, but if you got something, if not, we'll come back.
I was just thinking one of the most fun things that happened to me in lawyering was I was in a multi-defendant case. It was a case of tax fraud, and they had sent these lawyers from the Department of Justice down to try the case. They're I'm sure smart people, but they don't know anything about the courtrooms in East Tennessee. And we tried the case, and our clients, we knew our clients, there were some things we just could not explain. As I've said, there's some things we could not explain, but by golly, we got a not guilty. And the judge started reading. There were 36 counts, and the judge started reading. He said, as to count 1, we, the jury, find the defendants not guilty. We, the jury, find the defendants not guilty. Count 2, count 3, count 4. And then judge stopped, and he looked up and he said, do you want me to keep reading? Yes, Your Honor. Every one of them.
That's true.
Well, the courtroom has that formality, and things can be, it can create some humor. It can create some humor. I will say that.
I'm sure you've seen a lot of tears in the courtroom.
I've seen a lot of tears too.
Yeah.
I always tell people that start shedding tears in my office, golly, you're the first person to ever cried in my office. Nope. All right, let's go.
Folks, let's close with a prayer, okay? Lord, we're grateful for this time together as sisters and brothers in Christ, for the ways in which you call each of us to be at work in the world, to show the light of Christ, to be the light of Christ. We thank you for John, for his devotion to your kingdom, for his love for you and your church. Lord, pray for your continued guidance with him as he serves in so many different ways. And may we go from here tonight having been illumined about many things in life and how we can live out our faith. In the name of Christ our Lord, we pray now and always. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, John.
Thank you. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you. Wonderful.
Good.
You got us off to a great start.
Good.
You really did. You really did.